Hey, number ones, guess what I'm doing? Well, here I am in the middle of the night thinking about those unsolved questions in linguistics, those problems that have been breaking linguists' brains for a very long time. Now, middle of the night doing this, probably not exactly a symptom of a healthy mind. I guess I might need professional help, but there you go. You clicked, so I'm going to drag you through this. Let's try to think of like the 5 major linguistic problems that haven't been solved, and perhaps we can discuss them, give us a little bit of a food for thought. The first one is actually going to make your mind blow, because here's the thing. We don't know what a word is. Now, I know you're thinking, oh, come on, everybody knows what a word. I know what a word is. Okay, then give me a clear definition. What is, or how do you define, a word? And before you say anything, remember that in linguistics, we like being precise. So when you're giving me a definition of what a word is, well, this definition needs to be able to fit every single language on this planet. Not 100 languages, not 10,000 languages, all languages of the entire species. So you see how that's starting to become a little bit of a problem. On top of that, we really have to ask ourselves, what constitutes a word? Is it just a bunch of sounds? Does it have to have a meaning? Like, clearly we understand that glass is a word. What about the blah blah? Is that a word? Because it's just a mixture of sounds. So already you can see that if meaning has to be in there, then already we are kind of starting to shape our boundaries. But believe it or not, it's not as simple as it sounds. What about a particle? Is at a word? Is a word? Is an article a word? Or does it have to be a noun? And once you're adding nouns, and of course adjectives and verbs, these are all words. What part of a verb? Because if you really think about it, if you stop for a moment, go is a word. To go, is it a word or is it to? Because there is the to component at first. And what about conjugations? Is goes a separate word because it does have an S? What about went? Well, you might think, well, of course went is a different word because it sounds different. Okay, what about work, worked? Are conjugations belonging to the same family? Therefore, they all become a word. What about going? You see how this is starting to shape the problem here. And it's going to be a definitional loop because, once again, we're just using English here as an example, but imagine all of the different languages and the ways they work. Some languages don't even conjugate. Some languages do, but others add particles, add suffixes, add prefixes, add characters. In one language, it's okay to consider it one word even though it's a conjugated portion or it changes shape. Iku, ikimashita. Are these two different words or are they the same word? And if they are the same word, what about Chinese where the word to go is chu? But if I wanted to say I went, am I going to do chu guo or chu le? That's a problem because then the definition starts to become vague. And these are just a couple of languages. Once again, we need to have a definition to describe what a word is in the entirety of all languages of the entire species. So you can see how linguists have been trying to solve this problem unsuccessfully. And in fact, I will be tackling this on my book. If what I just said impresses you, let me wrap up this point and then I'll tell you more about this book, about how to learn languages. It's going to be great. But on my book, I do tackle this because at the end of the day, whether we define it or not, what a word is perfectly, it's just food for academics. It doesn't really change the way we learn words, but it may. It doesn't directly impede or affect the way we learn languages, but it does when it comes to goal setting. And this is in fact a section that I do cover on my book about learning languages. Because if you think about it, it affects the way we set goals. Because some students will ask, well, how many words can I learn in a day? And how many words should I memorize in general to be fluent? And that's a problem because if we can't exactly define what a word is, then it's difficult to number them. And those numbers will affect your goals. So you might hear people say, oh, you can learn 10,000 words in a month. Well, they're frauds if they say that. But apart from the frauds aspect, okay, but are you counting every single conjugation as a word? Because that's definitely going to inflate your goals, but at the same time, it can influence the way you feel about your goals. I personally think that it's usually better, and that's how I count words, to count them as word families. Usually, I don't even count particles. Because at the end of the day, this whole how many words can you learn and trying to figure out ways to inflate that number because you're literally counting every single possible, even to the most minute combinations of sounds just to boost that number becomes the how much do you bench pro of language learning, which is a complete and total waste of time. It can influence your goal setting. It can make you think of unrealistic goals. It's not good. It's just a way to inflate your ego. It doesn't matter. Yet, it is an unsolved problem, what the definition or universal definition of a word is. As I was saying, if you have never heard of me actually having a book about learning languages, well then check this out. Massive announcement. Check this out. You're gonna love it. As many of you know, or at least I think you know, I've been writing a book, my new journey into becoming an author. I've mentioned this on a few videos and on X, but this book was indeed crowdfunded. Now, any person who has donated or will donate to the crowdfunding will receive a full audiobook, and this is crowdfunding exclusive. So, as a way to say thank you to the people that have donated and supported my dream of becoming an author, if you have a minimum of $5 donation, you will receive the entirety of the audio file of the book, recorded by me with my voice, no AI involved, as a crowdfunding exclusive reward. This applies retroactively, so for all 262 donors that I've had so far, you'll get this, and anyone who decides to donate $5 or more, thank you very much, never expected, always appreciated, then you will be guaranteed a audio file of the book by the end of the crowdfunding campaign. Important, once the crowdfunding campaign is over, this audiobook version will not be made for sale. So this is once again crowdfunding exclusive. It's a perk. If you're interested in the audiobook, click the link in the description, and thank you so much. Point number 2 that we're going to jump into today is the differences between a dialect and a language. Now, this one is one that I care about very strongly, mostly because it does have to do and influences the way, for example, we perceive languages, specifically when it comes to regional varieties in Italy, where I'm from, but this can of course be applied everywhere in the world. So the first thing we have to understand is when it comes to the difference between a language and a dialect, this is really the domain of socio-linguistics more than linguistics proper. And in fact, it is a matter of also politics and history and culture. So the reality is that there isn't a major marker when it comes to the way we use these communicative systems between people in order to achieve successful communication as a species that specifically divide some of these systems into dialects and others into languages, of course giving languages a higher form. And the reality is that it is a matter of cultural dynamics. Because some people may say, oh, well, yes, but a language it has to be official, and a dialect is like, I don't know, relegated to a smaller number of speakers. And yet, this is once again a social aspect, but from when it comes to the complexity of the linguistic system, they might be the same. Even if you have less speakers, it doesn't mean that then it stops being a language, because otherwise, I mean, Hindi and Chinese alone, not to mention Spanish, if we add a second language, or L2, second language acquisition, these are the languages and everything else is a dialect. Like, it doesn't work that way. Now, some might say, well, yes, but, you know, languages usually have a rich depth when it comes to literature, whereas dialects don't have that. But look at my dialect, or should I say, regional language, Sicilian. And this is just one example, plenty of others like it. The Sicilian school of poetry was so impactful in the Middle Ages that it rivaled directly with the dolce stil novo of Tuscany, so the type of poetry that was famous in Tuscany. They rivaled. They were both the apex of literary production. And we have so much literature, poetry in Sicilian that it already disqualifies this as a way to say, well, yeah, but that one is just a dialect. The Italian is the language. As some linguists say, it's a little reductive, but I do think there is truth behind it. The reality is that a language is just a dialect with an army and a navy behind it. Point number 3 is a little different, but it has to do with language acquisition, which is one of the topics that I do address a little bit in details on my book. So what is the mechanism by which human beings, and specifically children, acquire a language, and how does that differ from second language acquisition in comparison to L1, or first language acquisition, so children versus adults? This is a big one, and there is a lot of contention, and some people are pushing it to absurdities. Like, we all know that children, generally speaking, have an easier time picking up a language, with a caveat. But at the end of the day, some people make it sound like, oh, children just magically learn a language without having to say anything just because they are immersed, and that's nonsense. Input alone does not make a speaker. But it is true to say that the way children approach language learning is very natural, very organic. We all do it with our first languages, is, in a way, intuitive. And that's the word I chose to use in my book, because I think it really exemplifies very well the difference between language learning as a child versus language learning as an adult. And as adults, we can try to map some of our language learning techniques to what works for children, but we do also have to remember that just do what children do. It's reductive because we're not children. So some things work, some things don't. And as adults, we do have advantages over children. For example, resource management, reason and logics, our prefrontal cortex are fully developed. So there is a lot that we can learn from the way children pick up, particularly pronunciation, syntax, and grammar, naturally. But at the same time, it's not really fully understood, and it's still this argument of nature versus nurture is something that we have been tackling as linguists and language learners. Moreover, is grammar hardwired into the brain, or is it learned through interaction and repetition? It's an interesting one, and I'll leave it at this. Next point, I would like to talk, and this is interesting for those of you who like me for history, is language isolates. So what is a language isolate? There are over 40 languages which are classified as isolate, and as the name suggests, there is isolation involved. It means that these have no known genetic relationship to any other language. It just kind of makes their history a mystery. And I freaking love a mystery. I don't know about you. So what happens is that we are used and very familiar with the idea of linguistic families, right? French, Portuguese, Italian, Spanish, Romanian. Great, these all belong to the Romance language family. And then you've got the Germanic language family, and then you've got the Slavic language family. We are used to this. And we can go back, right? Proto-Indo-European, whatever you like. Thing is, though, that yes, there are languages that don't fit into anything. And these are so strange. Now, personally, as someone who has studied history, I'm passionate about it, I do think that there are two things that could be reasons, or at least partial components, to try and explain how a language isolate occurs. And these are relocation and extinction. So if you have a cluster, population cluster, and they are related to other 5 tribes or even bigger populations, if you will, they speak different but related languages. So we now have, on our historical map, 5 languages. They're different but related. Imagine that one of these populations moves. They go somewhere else. There is a relocation involved, or a displacement, whatever it is, and they go to a different area, maybe even far away, but they thrive. They survive. They become powerful, economically stable, perhaps even military and politically relevant in the new location geographically, altering the geopolitics of that situation, imagine in the Bronze Age or in the Copper Age, whereas the other 4 communities die out. After thousands of years, particularly if this is happening in prehistory, so even before, after thousands of years, there will be no remnant of the other 4 or the related languages. And yet we will have this one single language which evolved and whatnot, perhaps even created a little bit of connections, but generally speaking, it's a completely separate language to the other surrounding cultures. And this is a mystery. Because we can speculate, this is very likely what happens in a lot of these cases, but it is fascinating. Something like that happened, for example, between Sumerian and Akkadian. Same area, not related, and they are absolutely fascinating. The next one that I want to discuss is the origin of languages. So how do linguistic systems generate in our minds, in our species? The problem with answering this question, which is of course still open debate, is that we don't have any explanation of that. We don't have any record for the very first complex linguistic systems and how they developed. For an obvious reasons, in order to have a record, you would have to be able to write. But definitely this is something that happened in prehistory. And so because it happened in prehistory literally means before history, meaning before the development of the written record. So while we do have a general understanding of when the writing system or the first proto-writing systems began, we have an idea. It can still be challenged with the advent of new evidence, of course. Also because, media that are used in order to write deteriorate. So we do have stuff in clay, we do have stuff on stone. Some might even argue that the very first symbols, maybe drawings, could be considered a beginning of a proto-language, maybe, for a writing system. Or maybe you want to wait until now the actual individual phonemes and graphemes, whatever you like. But the problem is that perhaps, most likely, the earliest one may have been done on perishable materials, whether it be skin, rawhide, could be wood, it's all gone. So we don't know. Who knows? Maybe the very first time a human being tried to write something and successfully managed to read it back after some time, or teach someone to read it that was external to the person writing, might have happened on freaking soil or sand. So good luck finding that. But we do have a general idea. But with the evolution of language into its complexity, they can't write it to tell us. They couldn't record it. And so it's extremely difficult to pinpoint. And I think that this makes it phenomenal because it also connects to a variety of questions that we can't answer. Like, is it a single mutation or is it gradual accumulation of abilities, cognitive functions, in fact, of the brain? How did it happen? And sound waves do not fossilize, so good luck figuring that one out. I really wanted to share this with you, so let me know which of these is the one that fascinates you the most. I know I use that word a lot. I like it. If you think there is a couple of others, other interesting points and mysteries that we still haven't solved, or areas of debate within linguistic environment that you think are also worth a note, let me know in the comments, of course. And for those who are interested in my book, when I do approach some of these, let me know in the comments, and do click the link in the description to my crowdfunding and download your sample. Thank you very much for your support and for joining Metatron's Academy. Stay curious.